Episode 3. The Realm of Blank Space. More than 8,000 years ago, on the ancient land of China in the east, in the deep universe, nebulae surged like boiling blood, the vault of heaven cracked, and the abyss of black mud dripped. Amidst the despair of all things returning to zero, the ancient echo of goddess Nuwa radiated high-dimensional divine light, holding the five-colored stones that gathered the universe's primal emotions and soared upward. The five-colored stones represented pure love and pain, turning into a gorgeous stream of light the moment they touched the crack. Wherever the light reached, the abyss was perfectly mended. Nuwa scattered the sparks of creation to the mortal realm, and this sky was originally firmly protected, leaving behind warm traces. After long ages, time flowed into a highly automated future. The visual temperature dropped sharply, and humans were alienated into cold parts on a massive production line. Deprived of a connection with art for a long time, the numb collective subconscious of humanity gathered in the dark, eventually generating an absolute rational force called Zero Domain. Giant grayish-white geometric cracks spread like lightning, ruthlessly destroying the cosmic space-time of art. The sky that had once been mended collapsed again, and countless precious essences of art shattered, scattering to all corners of the river of time. In a cold and lifeless dark corner of the city, a high-dimensional light glowed, and Iona emerged with the compassionate echo of goddess Nuwa. Her silver hair fluttered gently, and her hands softly cradled a glowing, translucent tesseract, the space-time blocks designed to collect shattered space-time. Looking up at the ruined spiritual universe, her eyes empty and sorrowful, she lamented the destruction brought by oblivion. Only by retrieving the scattered fragments of art and life's touching moments can we piece together the lost truth, goodness, and beauty. Grayish-white data covered the future streets of Taipei, and Taipei 101 in the rain was lost in the cold neon light. As the most ordinary cog on the assembly line of the city, the youth Li Yu had empty eyes. Iona passed the space-time blocks into his hands. At the moment of touch, the warmth of ancient art flooded his heart, bringing back the long-lost sense of pain and the reality of life. This time, we must mend the sky ourselves. Liu gripped the blocks tightly, about to embark on a mending journey to collect the lost truth, goodness, and beauty. Under the wide-angle lens, the city is experiencing an unprecedented sensory overload. Huge holographic projections cover every inch of the sky, and high-frequency electronic synthesized sounds, dense advertising broadcasts, and artificially synthesized white noise fill the air in an extremely crowded way. Here, no corner is quiet. Humanity has lost its sense of tranquility. It's a morbid dystopian anomaly. The neurons of the brain have been recoded by the extreme efficiency logic of the zero domain, causing humans to no longer be able to tolerate even a second of silence and natural blank space. As long as the ambient sound decibel is below a certain critical point, people will fall into extreme panic and anxiety. They must constantly fill themselves with meaningless data, sounds, and visual stimuli. On the street, no one wants to stop and look at a tree because it is too quiet. The silence of nature has become the most terrifying poison of this era. Liu wore heavy-duty noise-canceling headphones and shuttled through the deafening din. His brows were furrowed, and his breathing was rapid. Even though the headphones were turned on to maximum power, he could still feel the nerve-wracking manic frequency vibrating his bones along the floor tiles. He felt a sense of deep confusion and sadness as he looked at the haggard citizens wearing neural amplifiers who were still greedily absorbing noise. This is not a carnival, but a fear of a castrated soul. Human beings are afraid of silence, because silence will make people face their own hearts, and in an efficient society ruled by the zero domain, the heart is the most useless and inefficient redundant data. Ding. That's not an electronic sound, but a distant sound like coming from an ancient temple in the mountains. The space-time building blocks emitted a soft moon-white shimmer on Liu's chest. The light spread out in midair, as if a drop of thick ink had dropped into the clear water, miraculously opening up an area of absolute silence with a radius of 1 meter around Liu. In this rare blank space, Iona's spiritual connection was connected. Liu, do you hear the silence? Iona's voice was no longer a clear statement, but rather hazy and ethereal like ink. Zero Domain is erasing the last bit of blank space in the world. They fill their hearing with noise and their vision with data. When there is no blank space in the world, the soul loses the space to inhabit. In the light of the building blocks, there are vague shadows of the mountains. They are the majestic mountains of the northern Song dynasty, but the clouds and mists in the mountains are being mercilessly swallowed by the gray-white geometric codes. Look for those who know how to leave large blanks on paper. Iona's voice gradually became weaker, as if it was about to disappear in the wind. Go to the northern Song dynasty and find the tranquility lost by human beings. Liu took off his heavy noise-canceling headphones and let the ink light and shadow erupting from the building blocks wrap around his whole body. The second before the outside noise completely engulfed him, he closed his eyes and jumped into the deep ink space. When Liu opened his eyes, he found himself standing on the edge of a mist-shrouded cliff. This is the landscape civilization of China's Song dynasty. The air should have been filled with the cool scent of rosin, moss, and earth after rain. However, an extremely harsh, high-frequency current sound instantly broke the tranquility. The interference in the zero domain is embodied here as a code storm that fills everything. The order-oriented AI, which pursues ultimate efficiency, cannot understand the clouds and blank spaces in Oriental ink painting. In the logic of zero fields, blanks are unfinished data and errors that must be eliminated. I saw that the moving sea of clouds in the valley was being forcibly compressed into gray-white solid geometric squares. The vigorous ancient pine trees, originally with alternating shades of ink, were stripped of their moisture and vitality and turned into shriveled, low-resolution pixels. Liu struggled to move along the mountain road against this suffocating feeling of oppression. He came to a simple thatched cottage. The ancient man in the house, perhaps Fan Quan, perhaps the afterimage of Guishi, is walking anxiously in front of the desk. Under the emotional distortion of Zero Realm, these artists who originally had a troubled heart began to forget why they need to feel tranquility. They held paintbrushes and frantically tried to fill every inch of the paper, filling them with densely packed branches and stones, without any hierarchy or sense of breathing. No, it's not full enough. I need to draw something else. The artist murmured to himself, his eyes filled with the same blank phobia as the people of Taipei in the future. Liu knew that he had to break this deadlock. This is a puzzle about understanding art. He walked to the desk and held down the painter's trembling hand. He must recreate the process of ancient crafts and regain the flow of his heart. Why leave a meaningless blank? The synthesized sound of zero domain is like countless flies, reverberating 360 degrees in the valley without blind spots, bringing a great sense of psychological oppression. AI can use billions of pixels to perfectly restore the texture of each leaf and fill every corner of the canvas. A blank without details is a primitive and backward waste. Filling it up is perfect efficiency. He picked up the water bowl and carefully dropped a few drops of clear mountain spring water on the inkstone. Then, he picked up an ink stick and began to grind it slowly and evenly on the inkstone. Sand, sand, sand. The sound of grinding seemed so weak in the thatched cottage filled with electronic noise, but it also carried an incredible sense of rhythm. Liu forced himself to calm down and focus on the friction between the ink stick and the stone inkstone. He watched the clear water gradually being dyed into a deep black and understood that the intensity of the ink was actually the breathing of the water. He understands that true art is never about filling the paper. As the ink was ground, a strong ink fragrance temporarily dissipated the surrounding code stench. In front of the desk, an ethereal light and shadow began to gather. The art fragment is personified. It is a Song dynasty hermit with a translucent figure and long flowing sleeves. He has no specific facial features, and his body seems to be made of different shades of ink. When he is silent, the ethereal atmosphere of the mountains and forests after the rain will appear around him, perfectly embodying the blank artistic conception of painting without painting. This hermit, who merged the spiritual reverberations of Fan Quan and Guishi, looked at Liu quietly. The edges of his body are being cut by gray-white geometric codes, turning into data debris and flying away. That's because the tranquility of this era is being obliterated and the foundation of his existence is collapsing. Young man, have you heard the sound of the mountain? The hermit's voice did not come out through the vocal cords, but directly rippled in Liu's heart. Everyone in the world wants to be satisfied, but they don't know that if there is no blank space in the painting, the wind will not blow in, the clouds will not flow out, and where should the human soul rest? Liu's eyes were slightly hot. He finally understood. In the future dystopia filled with noise and data, The reason why human beings suffer is because they have lost the blank space for their souls to rest. The blank space is not because it cannot be drawn, but because it is a supreme philosophy and a spiritual pure land left for the viewer. We cannot let this piece of pure land disappear. Liu gritted his teeth. The interference in the zero domain reached its extreme at this time. The violent gray-white geometry is like a physical avalanche, roaring down from the top of the mountain, completely burying the core space of travel to streams and mountains and early spring. The thatched cottage was shaking, and the edges of the drawing paper began to digitize. Fill it. Destroy the void. Zero domain let out a deafening roar. Then let him see what real power is. The hermit smiled slightly and handed a tube of wolf hair pen to Liu. Liu took a deep breath and dipped the brush into the thickest black burnt ink that had just been ground. At the last second, when the entire art space and time was about to completely collapse, Liu did not choose to paint a tree or a stone. He chose to leave it blank. The tip of his pen landed heavily on the edge of the drawing paper, creating a very powerful ridge of burnt ink, and then he turned the tip of the pen to perfectly give up the large blank space. It is a dividing line that protects the clouds and silence. It is a craft that protects the soul. Wow! There was no earth-shattering explosion. Instead, there was an ultimate, soul-trembling silence. Starting from the burnt ink that Liu put down, the originally gray and white geometric grid collapsed instantly. The ultimate black and pure white spread across the entire world with an overwhelming momentum. The mountains stand tall again, and the clouds and mist flow again. In terms of hearing, those harsh electronic noises and synthetic sounds are instantly extracted. Instead, there was a crisp bird song coming from the empty valley, and a sound of gurgling water that was like washing the soul. The symphony emerged as an extremely restrained but deep ensemble of cello and guqin, with a unique oriental broad-mindedness and remoteness that instantly filled the entire time and space. The remaining emotional memories of the entire civilization awaken in time and space like a gentle torrent. The awe and sustenance of countless literati and poets towards the natural mountains and rivers have turned into little bits of ink fragrance and blended into the wind. The space-time building blocks float in midair, emitting a soft moon-white halo, fully recycling this powerful blank energy. Liu looked at this huge three-dimensional ink painting quietly. The reason why Oriental ink landscapes exist is not to leave behind skills. Liu felt the tranquility in his heart, but to let future generations know that there were people who lived so truly and knew how to keep an inch of pure land for themselves in the hustle and bustle. The high-frequency electronic sound is still roaring, and the huge holographic projection is still flashing. Repairs are limited, and the world cannot become quiet instantly. But there was already a blank space in Liu's heart that no one else could take away. He no longer felt that those noises could pierce his soul, because there was a quiet mountain forest in his heart. Just as he was immersed in the aftertaste and philosophical reflection, another change occurred. Inside the space-time building blocks on his chest, those precise small squares suddenly began to rotate extremely irregularly and at high speed, making a strange click-click sound similar to bone friction. A blurry picture of the real world was briefly projected in midair. The people on the picture were like plastic dummies without pain. They cut themselves but had no reaction, and they couldn't feel the temperature when they hugged. This is a clear warning of the next reality anomaly. Humans gradually lose their true perception of the body, and their senses become numb. At the last moment when the projection was about to dissipate, an afterimage of a marble as white as snow but full of cracks appeared vaguely in the corner of the screen. That is the ultimate human aesthetic symbol of ancient Greek sculpture art. The afterimage of words flickers in the noise. Fragments of art. Divinity in marble. The light of the building blocks suddenly went out, leaving only a trace of cold stone powder smell. Liu gently stroked the surface of the building blocks. He knew that in order to regain the lost pain and body temperature of human beings, he must go to the palace full of marble statues.